Hello and welcome to Hey Ask Me Stuff, the show where you get to ask me stuff. My name is Ken Coughlin. I'm a Christian apologist coming at you from Trinity Lutheran Church in Joppa, Maryland. Today, the day you're watching this anyway, is September 5th. A little bit of a different feel to the show tonight because some of you may have noticed already, we're not actually live. This is pre-recorded. Normally the show airs live Tuesday nights at 6:30, and I know in last week's episode I promised I'd be back live next week. And then like the day after I did the show, we got an email from my son's high school that says, hey, hope to see you at back to school night. And guess when back to school night is? The exact night that the show is supposed to be airing. So I couldn't do the show live. Sorry, I'm a dad. I got to be a dad for my son. So that kind of threw a wrench in the works. But what I decided to do was still pre-record something so that we do still have a show to air on the Tuesday when I'm at back to school night. So normally what the show is about is it's entirely viewer driven, where you, the viewers, get to submit questions online for anything that you would like to see answer on the air. And the way you do that is you go to this website right here, trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff. And on that page, you'll find a form you can fill out where you can submit your question. It gets put in a large bank of questions that we pick from every week. And who knows, you fill out your question there and you might have the opportunity to have your question answered on a future episode. Now, normally when we're live, we also encourage live interaction. You can interact in the live chat. The chat appears on the screen and all of that, and we can actually talk back and forth if you're watching us live. Obviously, that's not going to happen tonight because I'm not live, but you can still comment in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you think. Now, we're doing something a little bit different tonight as well, other than just not being live. Instead of tackling a brand new question that I really didn't want to do when we weren't live, in case somebody did want to actually interact with it, instead I'm doing something I say never to do, and that is I read the comments section. So I promise I do that every week, but it's a joke, right? And so I went back to last week's episode on, is there proof that God exists? And I looked through the comments and I decided, okay, I kind of wish people would watch the show live. We could actually interact live, but wouldn't it be kind of neat to do an episode where I'm just kind of addressing some of the issues that were raised in those comments? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull up some of those comments and we're going to talk about them to kind of give answers to the people who left those comments. A couple caveats, just so you know, you'll see when I pull up some of these comments, some stuff is blacked out. If you're going to comment, you got to be appropriate. All right, there are certain filters on our comment section, things that I will not allow to go through. There's one comment in particular that I'll talk about here tonight that you're not going to see on the live chat because those filters would not allow it to be posted. So a couple things I had to take out there, but I'm still going to answer your questions and respond to your comments here on the show tonight. So that being said, I do hope to be back live again next week. And again, if you have comments about the comments, then throw them in the comments, right? And then another quick reminder, we are trying to get up to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, please do so. Go right ahead, click that little subscribe button, click that bell notifications so you don't miss any of the great content that we have going on here. So that being said, we are going to go ahead and get started with the comments section tonight, talking about some of the comments. Let me pull up the first one. Oh, of course, it's way too small for me to see what it is. So let me do something else here as well. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the questions here in a way that I can actually read them. All right, here we go. All right, let's bring up our first comment. Here is our first comment. And this comes to us from Andre Henderson. Actually had two comments. But I'm assuming that they look like they're related, same author. So I'm assuming, Andre, that you met these together. And he's responding to something I said in the show. He says, LOL, how would you like it if I did that to you? You did exactly that by describing atheists as people who require 100% proof, above the type of proof they require in any part of their life. Knocking down straw men isn't apologetics. All right, so if you don't remember what Andre's talking about here, I was giving the example of conversations I've had with a number of atheists and skeptics in general about faith and about the definition of faith. And where they'll tell me, well, faith is just blind faith. It's believing even though there's no evidence to believe it whatsoever. I said, no, that's not what Christians mean by faith. And I kind of go back and forth with them on that. And I said, no, that's not what Christians mean by faith. And they'll say, yes, well, it is what faith means. I'll say, no, it's not what faith means. And I made the comments like, what if I were to turn that around on you and say, well, atheism then means that you 100% believe in the Christian God and that he should be worshiped. You wouldn't like me telling you what you believe any more than I think you should be able to tell me what I believe and what I mean by these terms. So what Andre is doing here is he's basically accusing me of violating my own rule. He's saying, well, I claimed that it's unfair of atheists to kind of put words in a Christian's mouth and insist that, Christian, this is what you really mean by faith, because this is what faith means. And I'm sitting here protesting, no, it's not what we mean. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Well, what Andre is saying here is that I'm doing the same thing. He's accusing me that when I say that atheists require 100% proof, that I'm doing the exact same thing. That an atheist will say, no, I don't. I'll say, yes, you do. They'll say, no, I don't. I'll say, yes, you do. Well, there's a couple ways to respond to this, Andre. First thing I'll say is, that's just not what I said. I mean, that's not what I said. I, number one, very clearly said that this is some skeptics I have spoken to have said this, all right, or have by implication required this, even if they don't flat out say they're requiring it. By implication, that's what they've done. I didn't say all atheists and all skeptics were doing it. As a matter of fact, I said the exact opposite of that. Let me pull this up here right now. We're going to transition over here, and we're going to play a little excerpt from the very end of this conversation, where I was talking about whether that I'm saying that some people I've talked to have made this suggestion, have essentially said, some have flat out said no amount of evidence will ever convince them, and actually praised them, said at least they're being honest about it, and some have by implication done that. And I was talking about a limited set of people that I have spoken with. Just before I say it, listen to what I actually said here. And so this whole idea is just an example of what I'm talking about, where a lot of skeptics kind of try to set the bar so high that it becomes very, very clear that they'll never, it doesn't matter what you show them, they're never going to believe. They're starting out with a mindset that nothing, already kind of predetermining that nothing you can show them is going to convince them that God exists. So they're just not going to believe that God exists. Great. And in fairness, I've interacted with some people that openly admit that, and that's great. And good on them. If they openly admit, I will ask them, well, what type of evidence could I show you that would convince you that God exists? And lots of times the answer is nothing. There's no evidence that would convince me that God exists. Okay, well, great. At least you're upfront about it and you're admitting it, as opposed to others who claim to be reasonable, but then they start piling on these requirements and imposing these unreasonable requirements upon evidence for Christianity that they don't require anything else in their lives. And that's where it gets to be unreasonable. It's not all the skeptics, but it's a lot that I've interacted with. I'm sorry, what was that last thing that I just said? Did we catch that? Did you catch that, Andre? Explicitly said, it's not all skeptics. It's just a lot that I have spoken with. All right? And that is a true statement. So you claiming that I am doing the same thing that I'm accusing atheists of is just flat out false. I never said that. I never made the claim that all atheists insist upon 100% proof. As a matter of fact, I said the exact opposite of that. I said not all atheists are requiring this. Some atheists are requiring this. And I have spoken to atheists who are requiring this, and I was addressing that particular subset. I never claimed they all did. So no, I'm not doing the same thing. I'm not having this battle where I'm telling atheists, this is what you believe. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. I'm assuming, Andre, you don't believe that. Great. Good on you. But you're also mistaken if you think that there are not a good amount of atheists out there that are not requiring this, that are not flat out saying no amount of evidence will ever suffice. Here are some examples. All right, here's an article. I'll just give you a couple that is found online with a real quick Google search for the Center for Inquiry. Proving God's existence is impossible, so stop trying. All right, and you go down and read the article, and that's exactly what it says, that God is impossible to prove to anyone. It's actually impossible to prove to anyone that this God exists. And it goes on to defend why they think it is absolutely impossible. No amount of evidence will ever suffice. Here's another article from IAI TV, I think, talking about Wittgenstein. And it says, for it's not just that Wittgenstein believes that no empirical evidence is in actual fact available. It's rather that even if, per impossible, it could be available, this would not be a good thing, but would rather destroy the whole business. That is to say, if there could be such a thing as evidence for the existence of God, then God would become an in principle perceivable, observable entity whose existence one could infer from empirical grounds, such as, say, from footprints or behavior of light. This would be to treat the concept of God analogously to the idea of the Loch Ness Monster, for example, or to a distant planet. On such a conception, there would only be a quantitative difference between being God and a human being. That is, the former would only differ from the latter in respect to how much more of certain properties, such as powers the entity has. There would not be a qualitative difference. And I'll stop reading there, but hopefully you get the point. There absolutely 100% certainty are atheists out there who flat out say no amount of evidence will ever convince them that God exists, period. Do all atheists say that? No. Do some atheists say that? Yes. That's the claim that I made in my last video. And so your comparison, you're claiming that I was violating my own rule is just not correct. Sorry. All right. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Here's our next comment from the comment section. And this one comes to us from FNAF Boy, somebody who's a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's. This is a good one. I like this question. Thank you for asking this, FNAF Boy. Hebrews 11, it's actually chapter 11, verse 1, says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Explain to me how this is not wishful thinking. All right. Well, first of all, what I guess I'll say is wishful thinking is not the same thing as blind faith. All right. What I was addressing in the last video was the claim that Christianity, that atheists claim that Christians insist on blind faith, which is faith in spite of the evidence, even if the evidence is completely against you, that you should still believe. And I claim that's not what Christianity means by faith. FNAF Boy thinks it is what Christianity means by faith, and is saying, well, here's this verse to prove it. Explain this verse to me. Okay, let's explain this verse. This is actually a portion of a slide from a class I taught on Hebrews last year about this specific verse, chapter 11, verse 1, a very famous verse. And if you look at it, and again, we always have to read in context, but it gives two key terms describing faith. Confidence, all right, and assurance. What do those terms mean? All right, confidence is exactly what I said last week. Having confidence in someone is having trust in them. All right, just like when I said my son trusted that I would catch him, he had confidence that I would catch him. All right. Literally, you're bringing up this verse, I'm assuming, because you think it disproves what I said last week. It actually just uses a synonym for what I used last week, all right? It is literally saying the exact same thing that I claimed. We have to have confidence and trust that God will do what he says he will do. Now, where does that trust come from? It comes from assurance, all right? Assurance is belief in God's character, believing that he is who he says he is. So if we start out by believing God is who he says he is, all right, then that lets us know he has the ability to do this, right? If God is who he claims to be, then we know he has the ability to do what he says he's going to do. And that's what allows us to trust him, all right, to have that confidence. So, I mean, maybe you disagree with me. I'm telling you right now, that's what Christianity means when it's talking about this Hebrews 11, 1 verse. Literally the exact same thing I was talking about last week. And even if you just look at the plain language of it, faith is confidence in what we hope for. Are you telling me the only things you hope for are things that you have no evidence for whatsoever? No, of course not. I mean, I could be going on a picnic this next weekend, and I hope that it's going to be sunny and not rainy when I go out for my picnic. Does that mean that my hope is just because it's hope? It's completely blind. I have no evidence whatsoever for that. Well, no, I could have checked the weather report. All right. So absolutely, you can still have evidence for things you hope for. Now, not 100% evidence. with some weather people, maybe not 10% evidence. No, obviously weather people don't always get it right? But that doesn't mean there's no evidence of it. So to equate this verse with blind faith is not only is it inconsistent with the interpretation I just gave you, but it's inconsistent with just basic grammar and what these words mean. That's not what they mean. All right. Let's move on to our next comment. This is a good one. I'm assuming this was just I'm sorry I had to block out the name. The name was not appropriate. I'm assuming this was a response to the title of the episode, right? Is there proof that God exists? No. All right. Well, hey, that's your conclusion. That's your conclusion. I kind of thought I provided evidence that depending on how you define proof, if we define it properly, the answer is yes. You're not convinced by it? I can't convince you. That's fine. Whatever. All right. Our next one here. Let's see. All right. Our next one comes from, sorry, I got to bring it up on the big screen so I can see it. From Mark Neuenbauer. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, Mark. That is not my intention whatsoever. Mark says here, my first question is why apologetic videos often take so long to start with their first point. It took you 5 minutes before you started talking about what constitutes proof. Actually, I think it was around 4 minutes and 15 seconds or so, Mark. Okay, well, the answer to that question, Mark, is because this is a podcast. This is a talkie show. That's what we do. I mean, and that entire 4 to 5 minutes you're talking about was me telling people what the show is about, in case they've never been here before. How did that get their question on a future episode? All those things that make the show operate, asking people to like and subscribe to the channel. I get it. You want your answers quicker. So you didn't watch it live, so just skip ahead. Now, that being said, I get it. And sometimes you just kind of like, I want people just to get to the point. We have that too on the channel. YouTube loves shorts right now. They're boosting shorts everywhere. Go to our shorts feed. All right. Go to our shorts feed where we do have a number of things. Now, granted, they're only a minute long, so they can't give you the full scope of the conversation about an issue. You kind of have to limit it. But it does that. I mean, at least it gives you, it cuts right to the chase. It cuts right to the point. We also have a playlist on our homepage that is just clips from this show. All right. Now, again, it's not everything that's on the show, but it's clips. And so we pull out particular topics, particular items, and those, they get right to it. They get right to the point. So we have some of both on the program. Mark, if this particular show, this format, this podcast format isn't for you, okay. It's not going to be for everybody. That's great. I take no offense to that. Just go ahead and watch one of the other types of things that we have on the channel. We got a wide variety. All right, moving on. Sorry, I got a little voice issue going on here today. It comes up and haunts me periodically. This one comes from, that's just a number and random letters. I cannot decipher the username. So you are God. That level of responsibility is too much for grown men and women who have convinced they are children of the dog. So I don't want to speak out of turn. I mean, I don't know whether this is supposed to be sarcastic or whether this is advocating for some type of Eastern religion. There's a lot of different ways I could take this. If I assume that you are advocating for some of these other world religions that actually say that, or heck, I could throw like some Mormonism and other things in there too, to some extent. There are obviously other world religions that claim that we are all divine in some sense of the word. And if that's the case, well, I mean, the only thing I can say is I can just point you back. I guess that's your opinion, but I'll just point you back to last week's show. I think that if the arguments that I presented, again, I know I did it in very quick summary fashion, but if the arguments that I presented on last week's show are true, and I think they are, if they're sound arguments, again, I think they are, then that would disprove this claim. We are not all God, all right? Because these arguments show some of the nature of God. There is this one transcendent being that is above us, and it's kind of in the nature of the Christian God. All right, I got one more comment to go through, and it's a long one. This is the one that I told you I had to, this is actually not going to show up if you look at the video itself, because there were a lot of things in here that the screens, the screen or whatever did not allow through, the filter rather. And so I'll highlight a few things here that Gerson X3000 had to say here. I swear every argument for God boils down to a God of the gaps. I don't know, therefore God. I'm going to blatantly assert the universe is created, therefore it needs a creator. I mean, I'm just going to stop right there for a second and ask you, Jerson, if you're going to make a claim like that, you got to back it up. You got to back it up. You can't just make a claim, all right? You make a claim here. You say that every argument for God boils down to a God of the gaps in the form of, I don't know, therefore God, all right? Show me where any argument, even one, in any argument, any way, shape, or form that I presented last week takes that form. Anyone, a single one. None of them take that form. This is something you see lots of times online in atheist circles. It's a conclusory statement that says all these arguments just say this. Really? How so? How do they say that? And the way you have to make that claim, like addressing any argument, this is philosophy 101, logic 101. If I make an argument and I present you with premises and a conclusion, then there's two ways you can attack that argument. You can either claim that the argument is not valid, meaning that the premises do not logically lead to the conclusion, or you can say it's not sound in the sense that the premises, the evidence that I'm presenting in those premises is not true, is not correct, all right? Anything else, just making a conclusory statement like this is not responding to the argument. You have not addressed whether the argument form is a valid form or not. You have not addressed the truth of the premises and whether the argument is sound or not. Those are the only two ways to respond to an argument, all right? Anything else is a non sequitur, all right? So you say that every argument boils down to that. I say, no, it doesn't. You say, yes, it does. I say, no, it doesn't. Look at the arguments. Show me where they actually say that. You also say in here that just going to blatantly assert the universe is created. No, I never said that. I mean, the fact that the universe had a creator was the conclusion of the Kalam argument. I presented argument and evidence to lead to that conclusion. I didn't just blatantly assert it. If you think that that conclusion is not correct, fine. Show me why that conclusion is not correct. Show me which of those premises is false. Show me how the argument that does not follow a proper logical form. If you can't do that, then you're not responding to it. Let's see. Something can't come from nothing, even though I'll give God a pass, that he always existed and came from nothing, therefore God. I mean, that's a kind of a grammatically nonsensical statement there, Jerson. To say, first of all, to say I'll give God a pass that he always existed, well, if he always existed, that's not giving him a pass. I mean, literally, coming from nothing means you went from a state of non-existence into a state of existence. At some point, you didn't exist, and then you came into existence. That's literally what that word means. So if there is an entity that has always existed, all right, then it didn't come from nothing. It couldn't come from nothing because it didn't come into existence, period. All right. And by the way, I would just direct you to a number of skeptical scholars nowadays that are trying to claim the universe always existed. Well, why are they trying to claim that? Because if something always existed, all right, then it doesn't need an additional layer of explanation. It doesn't need to have a cause, so to speak. So anyway, the universe is fine-tuned, even though literally the vast majority of what we can detect can't support our life form. I'm sorry, that's just a blatantly a simplistic statement to make. Are there things in this world that are negative, that cause death, cause disease? Absolutely. That's a whole separate conversation about the problem of evil. Matter of fact, I got a whole study, 6-8 week study, I don't remember, on the website where I've already taught about that. But to claim that just because there are certain things that happen in this universe that are detrimental to our existence, that the vast majority of what we see in our universe doesn't support us, is just, I'm sorry, that's just scientifically ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. I mean, you are existing right now to type that, all right? I mean, I am existing now to respond to you. And so obviously, I'm sorry, the exact opposite of what you claim is true. The overwhelming majority of what we can detect in this universe absolutely does support our existence here, all right? And there are some isolated, some smaller things, some implications of those realities, of those natural laws, for example, those constants. There are some implications of them that, yeah, can be detrimental to us, all right? But to claim that the vast majority of what we detect doesn't support our life, I'm sorry, that's just, I don't think there's a single cosmologist out there, whether they're atheist or not, or Christian or anything, Muslim, whatever, that would agree with your statement there, all right? That's just scientifically not true. God is a subject, and gave us this messed up subjective morality in my holy book. Yeah, and this is the moral argument stuff you're talking about here. And you actually say, well, it's subjective anyway. Since God is a subject, that the saying that morality comes from him makes all morality subjective, all right? Well, okay, maybe in the sense that you say it comes from a subject, and we can use God as the subject of a sentence, but it is objective as relates to us, all right? As relates to literally everything else, because whereas we as subjects are all kind of on the same ontological level, in order for there to be objective morality, there has to be something that transcends us, to which we are all subject, okay, for lack of a better word, that we all have to answer to, that defines us, that overrides us, overrides our opinions, all right? That is, in fact, like I said before, that is, in fact, God. And I will say also that it has to be a person. I mean, that's what you mean by saying God is a subject. God is a person, and it's his morality, not his opinions, it's his character, as I think I mentioned, that forms the basis for morality. But in order for us to have moral duties, not just moral values, but moral duties, in other words, obligations, then that transcendent source of morality has to be a person. It can't be anything other than a person. Why do I say that? Because you don't owe moral responsibilities to a rock. All right? I give the example of when I teach classes sometimes, it's like if we walk out at the end of class and you kick a rock into the flower bed, have you done anything morally wrong to that rock? No, because you don't owe a moral responsibility to a rock. If we walk out of the class and you kick me into the flower bed, have you done something morally wrong? Yes, because we do owe moral responsibilities to people, to persons, okay? And so if we owe moral duties at all, and there's a transcendent source of moral duties, it has to reside in a person who's capable of being owed moral duties, that we're capable of owing moral duties to. All right, let's see here. Let me move on to your next one. Here's a long comment here. Give me a second to pull up the next part of it. Here's the next part of it. And I know I'm not addressing everything. I can't address everything, but if theists would stop and think about how ridiculous it is that every good argument is, therefore God, I already addressed that. That's just not true. I mean, you could say that, but you making that claim does not make that a true statement. That is a false statement, what you just said. No theist says that. No argument takes that form. And if you're going to make the claim that all theistic arguments make that form, you have to back up your claim. He who makes the claim bears the burden. You have said this is all your arguments amount to. Okay, prove it. Show me where that is an equivalent statement to what is contained in those premises and the conclusions of the logical form. And you're not going to be able to do that because that's just logically an inaccurate statement. Most atheists simply say, I don't see enough evidence to justify God, as in I don't know, therefore let me keep looking for answers, instead of I don't know, therefore God. So not every atheist thinks Big Bang is a great explanation for the universe existing. I agree with you there. Or that evolution is an explanation for humans coming about. I agree with you there. Why are the Big Bang and evolution always brought up by theists, as if every atheist flat out accept those models? Nobody said every atheist flat out accept those models. Again, and this is something we've seen in a couple of these comments here tonight, is that, I mean, again, just like the first one that was kind of assuming I said something that I didn't say, lots of times, and I see this a lot in the skeptic world, but I'm not going to say it's limited to skeptics, all right? I think Christians do this too. It's human nature. We all do it, all right? We hear what we want to hear instead of what's really being said, all right? Just like before, it was the person made the claim that I was saying that all atheists require 100% evidence. And you go back and you listen to what I actually said, and I said the exact opposite of that, all right? But I believe that he genuinely thinks that's what I said when he wrote his statement. And that begs the question of why did you come across believing that? When if you listen to what I said, it's quite clear that I did not say that. So why is it that you walked away from that genuinely believing it? And that's because in our own minds, we just simultaneously as we're hearing things, we're editing it, we're revising it, we're hearing what we want to hear, and we're editorializing it so that we can reinforce our pre-existing beliefs. And that's something similar to what you're doing here with this current comment. You know, not every atheist believes these things. Why? And you're acting like Christians think that every atheist believes these things. No, I don't believe every atheist believes these things. Of course they don't. All right. I mean, heck, technically, a lot of people who are adherents of Buddhism. Buddhism is technically an atheistic religion. All right. But they're not going to agree with all of these things. But that doesn't change the fact that many, many atheists do believe these things. So the fact that not everyone believes it, does that mean somehow Christians aren't allowed to respond to it? We're not allowed to respond to things that some atheists believe that others don't. I mean, literally, if that's your standard, no one would ever be able to have discourse about anything, because every single one of us is an individual. We all have our own subset of beliefs. So if the only thing you think anyone should be able to talk about are things that everyone believes, or everyone of one falls into one category believes, then there's not going to be anything we can ever talk about, because it's impossible. We're individuals. We're not. You can't summarize a whole group like that, and we are allowed to discuss individual beliefs or subset beliefs, and that's perfectly legitimate. And then you just make the same claim here again, claiming the Christians are basically saying that, well, whereas atheists are claiming, well, I just don't know and I want more evidence, that Christians are saying, well, I don't know, so I'm just going to assume God, and that's not true. All right, I've shown that last week, talked about it a little bit tonight. And that is, talking about the first comment today was talking about making straw mans. That's a straw man argument, what you're doing. A straw man argument, for those that don't know, is when someone makes up an easier version, a false version of their opponent's argument that's easier to take down, and then they take down the false version. All right. When you claim that all Christians are just arguing that they're just basically saying, well, I don't know, therefore God. All right. And that's what they're arguing. That is a false statement. That is not what Christians are arguing. Christians are saying we believe the evidence does support the conclusion that God exists. I mean, literally, the whole first part of my episode last week, I was saying exactly that. I was talking about the fact that, no, I cannot show you to 100% certainty that God exists, but I do think that when we evaluate the evidence and the arguments, it is a more reasonable conclusion that God exists than that God does not. Explain to me how what you're claiming atheists believe and follow, what the rules they follow, is any different whatsoever from what I presented last week. I mean, obviously we reached different conclusions, but our approach was absolutely identical. I said, I'm not saying it's 100% certain, but I think that this conclusion is more reasonable than the other conclusion. And you're saying the atheists are doing the exact same thing. Both sides need to stop painting the other with a false brush. All right. All right. That's the last comment that I have. Again, if you did have I will tell you that if you did have another comment that you show, well, I'm filming this on Friday night. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get to everything. So if you made a comment after Friday night, I didn't get to it. I'm sorry about that. But this was as of Friday night. What I'd seen on there, I thought it'd be fun to introduce, or to address. So hopefully we had a little bit of good discussion tonight. If you got any other questions, comments, throw them down there in the comments section. God willing, we'll be back again live next week, Tuesday at 5:30. Sorry we couldn't be live here tonight. And again, one last reminder to go ahead and like the video, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help us get to that 2,000 subscriber count. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right. See you all next week. God bless.